Overwatch Champion Series is officially starting to ramp up. Over the weekend, North America and EMEA got through their Swiss stage matches, and we're now on to some of the main action that we will bear witness to for the first time in this new era of OWE sports. Welcome to the NA and EMEA Top 16 group stage, and the winners of these will go on to the main event that will decide who accumulates enough points to eventually make the international competitions held later this year. There's a bunch of information to unpack with the OWCS that isn't exactly being promoted all that well compared to what we had with OWL back in the day. So in the next two videos, this one as well as tomorrow's, I'm going to be covering a lot of the important information that you need to know about the OWCS group stage and beyond for North America and Europe. Everything from format to where to watch to who's expected to be the best, what I think is going to happen. All of that is going to go down on the channel the next 2 days. So if you want to stay in the loop about all things OWCS, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the big updates. And just because I think it's a more fascinating region with more competition in general, we're going to start off with EMEA. Let's get all the important scheduling and broadcasting and format information out of the way, since that is very important for those of you who actually are interested in watching the festivities. So the group stage is going to be held over the next 2 weeks to decide who goes on to the main event of Stage 1, and that's going to be held from March 8th until the 17th. All the action for the group stage and beyond is going to be held on the Overwatch Esports YouTube and Twitch channels, so you can decide which one you want to watch. If you're following and or subscribed to the Overwatch League channel beforehand, then you're already following these guys since that's what they rebranded to. Obviously, Europe is a bit further ahead than US time, so those games are going to start pretty early on in the day, so definitely have that bell icon enabled so you know when the matches go live. All, if not most of these matches should be broadcasted live, and we're going to have a lot of familiar faces on there giving you a breakdown of all the action, with Zoe, Jake, and Reinforce as the host and the analyst, and then having Jaws, Mr. X, Necra, and Uber commentate all the games. As for the format itself, the top 16 finishers from the EMEA Swiss stage held on Faceit will be participating in this tournament in 4 different groups, with the top 8 finishers moving on to the Stage 1 main event. And qualifying for these main events is very important, as it helps you accumulate circuit points, and said circuit points are the key to qualifying for the international events this year, as well as earning cash prizes. The more points you get, the more likely it is you'll be heading to Dallas and or Sweden later in the calendar year. And that main event will be held starting on March 21st through the 24th, but we'll get to that at a later date. If you want to know more about the upcoming group stage and beyond, as well as the scheduling information, check out the Liquipedia link, which I will leave a link to in the description. For now, let's focus on the group stage and the participants. So, the thing with EMEA that makes it so compelling is that there's a lot of competition. It seems like there are genuinely a lot of good teams in this race, and they're just more interesting and more competitive compared to North America in my eyes, and to a lot of you as well. Here's kind of like a rough idea of what my top 16 power rankings look like here. Admittedly, a bunch of these teams I don't know that much about, but we're going to learn about them, and hopefully they can make some noise. For now, they have some room to improve and to show us something, and I'm not going to be that confident in them compared to the known teams that I know are going to do very well in this thing for sure. Obviously, there's a lot of teams here, so I'm just going to go as quick as I can. So, starting off, obviously, I think most of us would agree that the top dog heading into this thing, the favorites to not only win the group stage easily, but also do well in the elimination stage coming up, is Twisted Minds. They're just at the top of the world right now. They were the only team in the Swiss stage to go undefeated, and they made light work of some of the top finishers such as Spraycheck and Rock Esports during that Swiss stage. They're just a step above. They know what they're doing. They've been playing at the best level possible for a long time. You know, they mostly consist of a bunch of the Saudi Arabian team that just won the World Cup. And when you add in Kellex, Slay, and Skyrippa, you just have a solid team overall. There may be some concerns about that backline and how they do, but when push comes to shove, they always seem to show up, and they have for a long time. We've seen it in Contenders, we saw it in this Swiss stage, we saw it in Saudi E-League. This team is not to be trifled with. Interestingly enough, they still did well despite the meta sort of starting to shift more towards what we're witnessing in South Korea right now. We're seeing a lot more dive with the Lucio and Kiri, Doomfist is rising in popularity, Tracer's becoming better and better as time goes on, but Twisted Mind still prevails regardless, despite this hero pool maybe not being as strong as some other metas for them, but they've shown they can adapt, but also play what they're comfortable on, and just be better than everyone else. They were boot camping in South Korea, they got a lot of practice against this stuff, they're ready to go, and I expect them to dominate. Another favorite to look out for is definitely OWL Spray Check, though, the second place finisher during the Swiss stage, which consists of a lot of SR peak check with guys like Cloudy and Vestola joining the mix, but then you have some other interesting names like Sauna, Kevster, and Kai, not to mention a Ghost Masa, Crimzo backline. Spray Check has a lot to offer with this team, a lot of solid competitors, and in my opinion they have maybe one of the biggest advantages of all thanks to having Kevster on this team, arguably the best DPS in Europe. Spray Check is a fairly balanced team. With Kevster being there, you have one of the best Tracer players in the world. Sauna's there for flexibility. Kai can play hitscan. Vestola's been playing some of the best Overwatch of his career lately. I believe that Ghost is a very underrated support player. Masa and Crimzo, two timeless classics. Spray Check, if they get it going, if they continue to improve, they can definitely end up being the top dogs heading into that main event. I expect them to breeze through the group stage very easily because this team is stacked. Then a bit further down, the 5th place finisher in the Swiss stage, the former London Spitfire team that I've been talking a lot about in recent videos. They recently got an org to pick them up, they're now known as Space Station Gaming, and I mean, there's not much to say about these guys that hasn't already been said. They're a timeless classic, they're consistent, they love to have that underdog mentality, and they have the synergy, something that some of these newer teams may not completely have down, which could give them a major advantage heading into these big, meaningful, high-pressure games. And, I mean, it's literally just a better version of what London was before, as they've gone from Admiral to Funny Astro. It's just a better overall team, at least on paper, but there are going to be some questions about how they do in this kind of meta. They've been streaming a lot of their scrims, thanks to Commander X. Shout out to him, he's the GOAT. But they haven't exactly found complete success while trying to transition into this new dive scenario. We've seen a lot of mistakes happen. Scrims aren't meant to be taken completely seriously, but we've seen dive be an issue for this team in the past. They can't exactly run Rhine because Rhine is absolutely terrible right now. They're going to have to find their own ways to win. And I just don't know if they necessarily have it in them to be clear-cut favorites right now. Doomfist is really strong, like I've been saying, and they're just not a Doom team. We've been seeing them play a lot more Winston than anything else. Sparker is definitely an underrated Tracer. I'm excited to watch him in action potentially, but I just don't know if there's enough there. London is going to have to seriously depend on their individual mechanics and adapting to what's actually being played, rather than going their own route for once, and I'm interested to see how that goes. Regardless, they still will be one of the better teams. I mean, they have a crazy amount of talent, plus that synergy, so I trust them to make it far and to get through the groups at the very least, but beyond, we'll just have to find out. Next, of course, we gotta bring up Rock Esports. I know I only had them 5th in my power rankings, but they have the ceiling to be much, much higher. I'm just not entirely convinced because they have a smaller team with some question marks, but generally, there's still a lot to like here. They were 3rd in the Swiss stage, very competitive team. I mean, they just recently beat Twisted Minds in the Saudi E-League, so that's something you gotta point out, even though there is a bit of controversy behind it. But I mean, it's a nice little mix of that Saudi Arabian, South Korean route that we saw in the Saudi E-League. And there's a bunch of talent to boast here, starting with Checkmate and Izayaki up front, 2 OWL superstars in their primes. Checkmate is one of the best flex DPS in the entire world right now. And then there's also another very interesting piece of this team that I think people need to keep a serious eye out for, especially if you didn't watch Saudi E-League, and that is their hitscan DPS prodigy, Rojo. A fan told me about this guy heading into the Saudi E-League. I didn't know much about Rojo at the time, but after watching him play, I opened my eyes up to the truth. This guy is here. He is an up-and-comer. I believe he is going to make a lot of noise during this group stage and beyond, and he could be one of the biggest superstar names in the entire tournament. This dude is no joke when he's on his comfort picks. Absolutely insane mechanical talent, especially when it comes to the Sojourn and other things. It makes me think Rock Esports may go a bit of a different route compared to some of these other teams, but it may not matter because playing up to Rojo's comfort is an automatic W at times. He is a young player trying to prove himself to show that he is also one of the top Saudi players in the world, and I believe that this is going to be a huge coming out tournament for him. Watch him very carefully. Him, Checkmate, and Izayaki is an absolutely insane trio. But the thing is, I don't know how the rest of their team will hold up. TVNT and AOY are both decent players, they've shown flashes, but holding up against talent of this caliber, we'll have to see how they do. Not to mention that I'm not exactly sure of the status of Checkmate and Izayaki. I don't know if they're going to be playing in Europe or not. I'm assuming they'd be on ping in Korea, and if that's the case, I wonder if they'll play as good as they possibly can. Rock Esports should still be qualifying through the groups no matter what, but beyond that, I will be very intrigued to see what their peak is at this current level. Then there's the team that I ended up putting slightly above them, and that is Oblivione. I believe this is probably the most underrated, underappreciated team in the group stage and possibly beyond. Oblivione has a very talented team from top to bottom. Maybe not a lot of the superstars that you're looking for to be a top tier contender necessarily, but they're good at like each position, and sometimes that can make up for a deficit like that. Just a well-rounded squad that all play well together. Led by Shockwave and Cloud, I'm liking what this team could potentially accomplish. They've got a good DPS rotation. Chase is experienced on tank. Crispy and Canale is also probably one of the most underrated backlines in this tourney. Oblivione has shown they can be competitive. They showed it in the Swiss stage. We've seen them scrim against London a lot and more than hold their own. Oblivione is a team to look out for. I'm not saying they're going to make a finals or anything, but don't be shocked if they get out of the group stage with relative ease. They've got the talent to make this work. I think their confidence is growing by the day, and they're probably the dark horse I'm going to keep my eye on the most during the groups. Those are like my 5 favorites, though, that I am going to enjoy watching, that I think have arguably the best rosters out of anybody else in the groups. But of course, there's some other interesting teams out there with some notable names that I wanted to bring up super quick. The first of which is Raspberry Racers, who surprisingly got 4th place in the Swiss. Raspberry's been around the scene for quite a long time. They've been competing in EU Overwatch for years and years, and they have a lot of recognizable names, like with Gustav and Yoko. I think this is a pretty decent team, although looking at their match history, they didn't play a lot of the top dogs, hence why they were able to go 8-1, but still, all the power to them for making it this far, and I'm intrigued to see if they can actually make a name for themselves here and not just be a beneficiary of having a lighter schedule. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you have a team like Peps, a team that's very recognizable in the EU scene that just barely made it here. I mean, they were on the brink of elimination in a must-win game in a map 3 in their final match of the Swiss stage, and they were able to get it done and make it here against all the odds. And honestly, this is a team a lot of people are going to be very down to root for, as they've got FD God, Ben Best, Poco, they have Hybrid and Naga as well. Cronus was also extremely good during the Swiss stage. In that do or die game, I remember him hitting like 4 or 5 headshots in a row on the enemy Zarya. Just an absolute beast when it really mattered the most. This Peps team has some room for concern, as there were a lot of close calls, and they didn't exactly do great against the solid teams, with the exception of Oblivione, who I believe they took to a map 3, but still, they clearly do have the upside to do well, and they're very likable, and I think their group that they're in is very manageable, so I'd like to see how far this team can go. Another team I'm very interested in is Quick Esports. These guys came out of nowhere, and they boast a lot of household names that I think are pretty easy to cheer for, highlighted by my boy Shax, one of my all-time favorite players, and a heavy Tracer meta, as well as Grathen, who's been pretty consistent for a long time, and Don, and Dala as well. Quick Esports has the making of one of those fun underdogs to cheer for. Me in particular, I'm looking forward to potentially watching Shax go back out there and play well on the Tracer again. He can play most Tracer players at a high level, and I think he could do the same here. This looks like a pretty good meta for this team. They're flexible, they've got a lot of pieces. I just don't know if they're going to make it through the groups, as sadly, there's a lot of very good teams ahead of them. Amongst some of the other names competing, you have a team like Sheercold. They've been a staple in EU for such a long time now. Consistent finisher, just like always out of them. You can always never count those guys out. And then you have Left Right Goodnight, a team that I believe participated in Flash Shops in NA. It's interesting to see them go over to EU now, but they've got some pretty recognizable names like Lethal, Kuffa, famous Australian tank player, Admiral, and Gala on the backline as well. Not bad at all. And let's not forget New Age, who have Sharp and Doge on their team, or the fact that Aw Yeah is here again, another staple of EU contenders for quite a few of the past years. These guys have the exact same roster basically as always. We know what these guys are capable of. We've seen them finish like top 4, top 3 a whole bunch of times, and maybe we'll even see them play some Junkrat again. They've got that famous Junk player Kaya on their team. I doubt he's going to play just because of the current meta, but a man can dream. Overall though, Aw Yeah, probably one of the more underrated teams as well, that just might make it out of the group stage despite their low placing in the Swiss. And of course, in the lowest tier, I have the teams that I just don't know as much about, who don't have the big names that can kind of give you that confidence to compete at the highest level. Teams like One Man Army, Salta, Bingus, Diempero, I just don't know enough about these players, although I am hoping that this could be a great coming out party for them, and it would be a pleasant surprise to see some more great competitors emerge onto the scene. Now for the groups. In Group A, I'm going to go with Twisted Minds, of course, to get through very easily. And joining them, I'm actually going to go with Quick Esports as the hot take. I feel like Peps is probably the more logical answer, but it's just something about Quick Esports I really like, and I'd like to see them go far and make it to that next round. I could see them making an upset happen against Peps, especially in this type of meta. And again, Peps did struggle at times against some opponents that they really shouldn't have in my eyes, so they have a bit to prove if they want to get back on the right track. I am hoping for the best for those guys, but just for the sake of having a spicy take, I'm going with Quick. In Group B, it's a bit more straightforward. It should just be Sheercold and Spray Check getting out without much of a problem. These other guys don't have as much trust in them, don't have as much firepower. Spray Check and Sheercold are two of the better teams in this tourney, so no problem there. In the C group, I decided to pick Oblivione and Rock Esports. I think, again, they're just the two best teams overall in this group. Two of, like, my top 5 teams in Group C. Kind of ridiculous. Although I could see a world where Left, Right, Goodnight could end up sneaking in over one of these two. They actually did take Rock to a map 3, which is interesting to point out during the Swiss stage. So anything can happen, but Rock and Oblivione just have some really great teams, and I don't think they're going to be slowed down this early. And finally, in Group D, I'm going with Aw Yeah and Space Station. Space Station for the obvious reasons. I mean, literally just London Spitfire. And then Aw Yeah because I just like their team more than Raspberry Racers personally. Could go either way between those two, but I just have more of a preference for those guys, as typically if you look at history, they do well in these types of tournaments. So they just seem like a more straightforward and convincing pick for me. A team that I have slightly more confidence in, despite not finishing nearly as high in the Swiss stage. Those are the 8 teams that I have advancing to the main event being held later in the month. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you think's gonna win? What teams are you cheering on the most? I'd love to know all your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoyed this OWCS preview video and you want more in the future and are looking forward to the NA video coming tomorrow, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I've been ATP, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.